Get your coffee or tea, and we will jump into the last section of the book of Judges. It's been quite the journey. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you so much, as always, for your word. We are ever grateful. We thank you that you teach us good and wonderful things, Lord, from your word. May you be exalted, Lord. May our lives be transformed through the study of what you have for us today. In Yeshua's name, amen. All right, well, we're coming to, again, this idea of no king in Israel, and it's going to lead us to civil war. And part of the issue that we've seen in the book of Judges is that it's not in chronological order. So last week, we looked at Micah and his own personal Levite, and then, of course, Dan going north, right? So we did that, chapters 17 and 18. Today, we're going to be looking at chapters 19 through 21. And we're going to see a guy that we've seen before, which is Phinehas, or Pinchas. But wait, he was back in the book of Numbers. So if this were really at the end of the period of Judges, that would be some 350 to 400 years, which probably he wasn't that old. I'm just taking a wild guess. And so really what we have here is an appendix. Chapters 17 and 18 and then 19 through 21 are the two appendices to the book of Judges. And understand that this whole book has one major theme, and there was no king in Israel, and everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. This is kind of a marketing book, if you will. In other words, we need a king. And you know who should be king? Saul? No, not Saul. David. Right? And we're going to see today that what the bad things that happen actually happen in Saul's hometown. Right? So that's kind of a problem. And so really, Bethlehem is the place we want to get our king from. We're going to see that. And also keep in mind that the book of Ruth, which we're going to study next, also happens in this period. Right? So the very period that we're looking at today is the same period where Ruth and her family, Naomi and her family moved to Moab. And then, of course, they come back. All right, and here is where we left off with the last judge of the book of Judges, which is, of course, Samson. And as we went through these judges, they kind of went from pretty good to bad until they got to worse, and then they were just pretty lousy. But I hope that's encouraging for you, because if God can use those people who were messed up, well, there's probably hope for you. There's hope for me, because I feel messed up much of the time. You know, you think by now we should have it all figured out and have it all together, and we've gone around the sun enough times, right, that I got to have it all figured out. But you know what? I still don't. And there's times when I'm just overcome with fear and worries and doubts, and I'm like, oh, Lord. And then I'm like, why did I worry again, right? Because I go through the same cycles that you go through, which is the same stuff that these people went through. And sometimes it's not always obvious that we're being led astray. All right, well, let's get into the study for today. And it came to pass in those days that when there was no king in Israel, see, there we go, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. He took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him, or in the Septuagint it says, because she was angry with him, and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judea, and there were 4 whole months. All right, so this already is off to a lousy start. First of all, why does a Levite have a concubine instead of a wife? Now, a concubine was an actual wife, right? They were bound, but she did not enjoy the same rights as a wife. So basically, this man of God who's supposed to know the Torah, he's not doing right by his woman, okay? And so he leaves her at the concubine status. Now, there's a little bit of a textual issue here. If you look in the Hebrew, it says that she played the harlot. I actually am more persuaded by the Septuagint reading, which is that she was angry with him. In other words, they had some kind of a spat. And I'm going to guess, just take a wild guess here, and I think I can prove my case based on how he treats her later, that he wasn't such a great guy. That somehow he was treating her really badly, and she's like, you know what, I'm out of here. This isn't working. And so she left. And he lets 4 months go by before he goes to reclaim his wife or his concubine. You get the feeling that he's not like in any rush to get her back. Maybe he's like, you know what, maybe I'm kind of glad that she's gone. But then eventually he decides to go and get her back. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back, having his servant and a couple of donkeys with him. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the father of the young woman saw him, he was glad to meet him. Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him, and he stayed with him 3 days, so they ate and drank and lodged there. Now, hospitality is a very, very important part in the ancient world. If you have ever had the chance to visit a Bedouin tent, now, of course, they do charge money nowadays, but they are very hospitable. And there's even stories. I remember hearing a story of a Jewish man, an Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jewish man who found himself in the wrong neighborhood, and he was being chased by Muslims, by Arabs, in the Arab quarter in Jerusalem. And he ran into a Muslim household. And the moment he did that, he became the guest of that householder. And suddenly all the guys that were chasing him could not do anything to him because now he was their guest. And so there was this huge expectation that if you bring someone into your house, you're going to be very hospitable to them. Keep in mind, there wasn't, they didn't have Motel 6, Holiday Inn. They couldn't just go and stay somewhere. And so this was just something very much expected. But I don't know, maybe there's a little too much hospitality here. But it sounds like the father-in-law is having a really great time. Right? He hasn't seen his son-in-law for a long time. And just stay. Then it came to pass on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning and he stood to depart. But the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh your heart with a morsel of bread and afterward go your way. So they sat down and the two of them ate and drank together. Then the young woman's father said to the man, please be content to stay all night and let your heart be merry. I don't know if you're ever like me, but I remember when I was a kid, we'd be over at our friend's house having a great time in the basement. We were playing, riding those little motorcycle things, whatever they're called, just having a good time. And then the parents, okay, it's time to go. Right? So they get us all together. We'd go out we get to the door, and the parents would stand talking at the door. And you're like, I could be downstairs playing right now. Then we'd go to the car, and the host would come out and kind of linger there and just talk a little bit longer. And I'm in the back seat thinking, man, I could have stayed in the basement playing. This is so unfair, right? But there's that sense of hospitality that the father-in-law is extending toward his son-in-law. So, stay another night. And when the man stood to depart, his father-in-law urged him, so he lodged there again. Then he arose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart, but the young woman's father said, please refresh your heart. So they delayed until afternoon, and both of them ate. Well, he's being very hospitable, and that's what you're supposed to do. It's kind of like, here, you need more food, have more. Until you say, no, I cannot eat any more food. I don't care what you put on my plate, I'm not going to eat it. At some point, you just have to say no. So this Levite, he's kind of getting a little bit frustrated at this point. And when the man stood to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said to him, look, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please, spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Lodge here, that your heart may be merry. Tomorrow go your way early, so that you may get home. Now that is actually good advice, right? Because now they're going to head out when it's late and not going to work out. However, the man was not willing to spend that night, so he rose and departed and came to opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. So the Jebusites live in Jebus, and eventually it would be King David who would take the city. But that would, of course, come about 100 years roughly later. They were near Jebus, and the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, "Come, please, let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites and lodge in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside here into a city of foreigners who are not of the children of Israel. We will go on to Gibeah." Now, we don't know what would have happened if they'd gone into this city. Quite possibly, they might have found somebody who was very kind and willing to take them in, and they might have found a lot of hospitality. But no, we don't want to do that because these are foreigners. We don't like these people. We're going to go on to Gibeah because that's one of our places. So he said to his servant, "Come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or in Ramah." And they passed by and went their way, and the sun went down on them in Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They turned aside there to go in to lodge in Gibeah, and when they went in, he sat down in the open square of the city, for no one would take them into his house to spend the night. All right, this is the first problem. So now they're in one of their own cities, right? They're in the province of the sons of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, in Gibeah, but nobody is showing them any hospitality. Because of that one thing, it's going to start a civil war. Although you could say it was maybe the Levite who didn't treat his concubine properly that started the civil war. It's hard to say exactly. But all of these things are adding up, right? It's a one more brick in the wall kind of thing that's adding up to it coming into a bad spot. Now keep in mind that Gibeah was also where King Saul was from. He was a Benjamite. Right? So that'll become significant because this book is really about what? Why we need a king. Remember that period of Judges where we kept going from bad to worse because there was no king in Israel? Well, then we eventually got Saul, but guess what? He didn't work out either. And so this is really this is kind of marketing, if you will, for why we need King David, right? Why he's the guy. So just then an old man came in from his work in the field at evening, who also was from the mountains of Ephraim. He was staying in Gibeah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. So he's from Ephraim. He's not actually from here. So the guy that shows them kindness is not actually from this city. We're in the New Testament, we're told to entertain strangers. Why? Because we might be entertaining angels unaware. Now, whether we're entertaining an angel or not, one of the things that we're supposed to do is to care for others. And that is one of our 5 pillars here at the Way Congregation, which is the tikkun olam, to kind of fix the world. Care for others. This is just basic stuff, right? I'm supposed to love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, and strength, and love my neighbor as myself. Well, who's my neighbor? Jesus informed us. Well, there's a story of the Good Samaritan, right? You guys remember the story? This man who was from Judah was going down to Jericho. He was overtaken by robbers, and they took all his stuff. And then a Levite passed by and didn't do anything. A priest came by and didn't do anything. Until finally, a Samaritan, right? We don't like the Samaritans. They're our enemies. They're bad. They don't have the Torah, or at least not the right version of the Torah. We cannot be friends with them. But who was the neighbor? It was the Samaritan. The Samaritan showed hospitality. He showed compassion. That's what that's all about, is to shake us in our sense that our neighbor is not always the guy who sits right next to us in the chair next to you here at church, or the best guy at work, or the best woman at work. And it's not always the person who you like the most in your Facebook groups. It could be the guy who's, the guy you don't like, who keeps saying all the dumb stuff in the Facebook group. That's who your neighbor is. And this town here in Gibeah of Benjamin was not showing hospitality. So they were not showing what? They were not showing love. But here this man, he finally does. And when he raised his eyes, he saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going and where do you come from?" So he said to him, "We're passing from Bethlehem in Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim. I'm from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah. Now I'm going to the house of the Lord, but there is no one who will take me into his house. Although we have both straw and fodder for our donkeys and bread and wine for myself. For your female servant and for the young man who is with your servant, there is no lack of anything." All right, so the Levite is saying, look, we've got our own supplies. We're not going to be even be a burden to you. Not even a burden, right? We can pay our own. We just need a roof and a bed. That's it. But we'll feed ourselves. You don't have to do anything. Just let us sleep in your place. And the old man said, "Peace be with you. However, let all your needs be my responsibility. Only do not spend the night in the open square." So he brought him into his house and gave fodder to the donkeys, and he washed their feet and ate and drank. So this guy's like, no way are you going to use your own food. I'm going to give you everything that you need. Because that's what it means to be a neighbor. We give, and we don't worry where it comes from. The Lord will provide. The Lord will provide it and show hospitality. Now that's interesting that many years later, when Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem, what could they not find? A place to lodge, right? And the most they could find was where they put the animals. And then, of course, they laid Jesus in the manger, where the animals ate from. But that's all they could find because, of course, it was full, obviously. Now, it says, and they were enjoying themselves. Suddenly, certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him carnally." But the master of the house, went out to them and said, "No, my brethren, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Seeing this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage." Now, if you're thinking, wait, this sounds like a deja vu. I've heard this before. Of course you have. In Sodom, right? This is the same kind of thing. And what did God do on Sodom? He rained down fire and brimstone because it was a wicked place. Now, before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so we may know them carnally." So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, "Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. Do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof." It's almost word for word. It's almost word for word. That's no accident, right? This episode caused the biblical writer to say, wait, this has already happened. This is just like Sodom. If you're paying attention, you'll be like, oh, I hear the same thing. Men of the city, they surrounded the house. Bring them out that we may know them carnally. I think that's exactly the same. No, my brethren, don't do this wicked thing. My brethren, do not do so wickedly because they're under my roof. Right? It's the same thing. And so this is a story showing us that there was no king in Israel. Not just that there wasn't a human king, but that Israel had so quickly gone after other gods. They'd fallen away from the Lord. And remember, this is happening pretty early in Israel's history. Right? This isn't at the end of Judges. This is toward the beginning of the period of the Judges. So, again, they went from bad to really bad pretty quickly, and now they're acting like Sodom and Gomorrah. Not very good. Well, in both Sodom and in Benjamin, there's no respect for women. We're going to contrast that with the book of Ruth, where we see incredible respect for women. So in Judges, it says, "Look, here's my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now, humble them, and do with them as you please, but to this man do not do such a vile thing." Now, it's awesome that a man is being hospitable and he doesn't want any harm to come upon his guest. That's very admirable. But on the flip side, it's pretty lousy that they're just like, well, we don't care about these women. You can just do anything you want. And, of course, we see the same exact thing in Sodom. But the men of Sodom were like, no, we don't want them. We just want these two men so that we can do our carnal stuff with them. Sadly. Then the woman came. Oh boy. Oh, there it is. Okay, well, I left something out there. Hold on. Anyway. All right, now look here. I want to show you. It says that God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So, men and women are both created equally in God's image. Equally in God's image. It's not that men are better than women. Not at all. Now, God formed man first. He formed Adam first. And then he took the rib, which I would suspect has the DNA in it. And so he took that and made Eve. But that's another story. Right? And then he brought Eve to the man. And he said, this is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Right? And he cleaved to his wife, and they became one flesh. The two shall become one flesh. So when they're one flesh, there it is, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. So the idea that that this Levite could just give up his wife shows you what about him? That he didn't care about her. That he was totally fine. Hey, as long as it's not me getting in trouble, then we're okay with that. But the men would not heed him, so the man took his concubine, notice the daughter doesn't go out, but just the concubine, and brought her out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. He basically took her like a piece of meat and threw her out to the dogs. Well, it's either my skin or her, so better her than me. Now you're like, oh, maybe this is why she ran away from her husband, because she was angry at him, and maybe he was not treating her right. But then after 4 long months, he goes and finally gets her, and he talks nicely to her. Oh, but I didn't mean any of that stuff, but I really love you. Whatever he might have said. Turns out she probably should have stayed with her dad, because she would have still been alive. But this man had no respect for his wife. And the host didn't show too much respect for his daughter either. But thankfully she was spared. But this one woman here, abused, raped all night, and then they let her go. I don't know how my slides got out of such order. But anyway. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was, till it was light. When her master rose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, there was his concubine, fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. She's just now getting back. Maybe there's hope. And he said to her, get up, let us be going. There's no sense, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened to you, or this is so terrible, or nothing. He has no pity, no remorse for this woman that he supposedly loves. That he went finally and called her back. Come on, let's come back home with me. Let's not fight. But he didn't care about her. But there was no answer. So the man lifted her onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. Well, it goes from bad to worse. This is definitely one of my least favorite stories in the Bible. And of course, I hope it's yours too. And this is where people, sometimes skeptics of the Bible, say, well, I just can't believe the Bible is, teaching all this stuff. Look, what is it teaching us? This is a negative lesson. This is not what we're supposed to do. This is what we're not supposed to do. This is a lesson saying, look, when we don't follow the Lord, we don't follow His Word, His Torah, this kind of stuff is what happens. And remember, the Levite, right? This is This is his woman, the Levite. The Levite is supposed to know what? The Torah. He's supposed to know the instructions. But he has no regard for this woman. God continually kept talking about take care of the poor and the widow and the orphan, right? Take care of the weak. This is throughout the Torah, right? Circumcise your heart. Show compassion. Here's one. Love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, it's all in the Torah, which the Levite was supposed to be an expert in, and yet he seems to have basically no knowledge of what he was supposed to do. And he let this woman, he threw her out there to the dogs, as it were, and they abused her, and then he says, get up. Well, he takes her back to his house. When he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. So not only does she die a horrible, tormenting death, but she doesn't even get a burial. He's just going to chop her up and send her by the post office to all the different tribes. And they're like, whoa, what happened? The Levite blew it. And so it was when all who saw it said, no such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up. So all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, as well as from the land of Gilead, and the congregation gathered together as one man before the Lord at Mizpah. And the leaders of all the people, of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. Then the children of Israel said, tell us, how did this wicked deed happen? So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, my concubine went into Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And the men of Gibeah rose against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me, but instead they ravished my concubine so that she died. Oh, little omission there. They were about to kill me, but then they just got a hold of her somehow. You kind of left out something there. That, yeah, they're going to kill you, so you gladly sacrificed her so that you would be okay. This is not what we're called to do, right? What does Jesus tell us? Take up your cross and follow me. We're supposed to lay down our lives. There's no greater love than a man should lay down his life for his fellow man. And here a man who's supposed to love this woman with all of his heart, who's supposed to be one flesh with her, said, here you go, guys, and have her for the night. And he leaves that part out. They were going to kill me, so I gave her up just to save my own skin. Whatever happened to being a man of honor, a man of integrity? But you know, this really has happened since the beginning. When God comes walking in the garden, hey, Adam, where are you? Oh, over here, God. A little bit. And make some clothes for ourselves because we were naked. Oh, who told you you're naked? Well, you know, the woman that you gave me, she gave me of this fruit and I ate it. Adam, really? The woman that you gave me? That's a classic line, right? Because Adam's not going to take responsibility. It's not my fault. It's your fault, God, for giving her to me, and then she kind of did this thing, and that's what happened. It's called taking responsibility for your life. Taking responsibility for your life. That's the first step toward maturity, is taking responsibility. Stop blaming everybody else. Sadly, that lesson took me a long time, and I don't think I'm fully there. But I've come a long way on the journey to stop blaming everybody else. You may say, I don't blame other people. Maybe you don't. But maybe you blame your mother because she wasn't there for you. Or your father because he didn't do something. Maybe it was your 6th grade soccer coach because he or she really should have said this but failed to do that. Maybe it was your 8th grade math teacher. I don't know. It could be a whole host of people. You may say, well, if I had been born on the other side of the tracks, I'd be doing so much better now. If I'd been born in that family or that city, or if I didn't live with all these liberal people, I'd be great. Right? We can blame the other party. It's all their fault. No, it's their fault. If it weren't for these guys, we'd be the perfect country. But what we need to do is stop blaming everybody else and start taking responsibility for my life. What can I do better, Lord? Lord, how can I be more of a man or woman of God? So I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel, because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel. It's not my fault. These things just happen to me. What am I? I'm a victim. I just had some bad circumstances. I'm really an upstanding kind of guy. No, you're a Levite who should have known better. And at the very least, you could be repentant. At the very least, be repentant of your terrible conduct. But he doesn't do that. He blames everybody else. I think this man is responsible. Now, obviously, the land was ripe for this to happen. But this guy caused a big, big mess, and thousands, tens of thousands of people will die because this man did not have any strength, did not have any boldness, did not have any courage to stand up and say, you know what? You guys outside my house, you have no right to either touch me or my wife. And if it means I have to die defending her, then that's what I will do. And yet, he let her go. Look, all of you are children of Israel. Give your advice and counsel here and now. So all the people of Israel rose as one man, saying, none of us will go to his tent, nor will any turn back to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do in Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000, to make provisions for the people, that when they come to Gibeah and Benjamin, they may repay all the vileness that they have done in Israel. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united together as one man. Then the tribes of Israel sent men throughout all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what is this wickedness that has occurred among you? Now therefore, deliver up the men, the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. So Israel's actually doing the right thing at this point. They're coming and saying, okay, give us these vile men. This needs to be dealt with. We need to do something here. This is absolutely wrong. And so it's kind of working right. But we see that Benjamin, as a state, if you will, is saying, we're not going to do that. We're not going to let these men be taken out so that righteousness can be restored. Instead, the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities to Gibeah to go to battle against the children of Israel. And from their cities at that time, the children of Benjamin numbered 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who numbered 700 select men. Among all this people were 700 select men who were left-handed. Everyone could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. Wow. These are incredible marksmen. Now, if you've noticed in Scripture, a lefty is not always thought to be a good thing. In fact, if you are, in Spanish you have the word diestra and sinistra. So diestra is right-handed and sinistra is left-handed. Like, okay. But the word sinistra means what? Sinister. Right? So if you're left-handed, you're sinister. Ooh, okay. Now, there's just kind of a bias against left-handed people. I don't think there's anything to it, but there is a bias against left-handed people. But in this case, these guys could throw a sling, and they could throw it at a hair's breadth and not miss. That's incredible marksmanship. This is a little bit of, oh, by the way information so that we understand what happens next. Because the Benjamites put up an incredible fight. They really do. And we're going to see how God is actually going to let wicked people judge other wicked people, which happens quite often. And this is why we need to be slow to judge other people. You might see somebody sinning. You're like, oh my goodness, that is such a sin. That's wrong. And you could be 100% correct in your assessment. But here's the thing. What about your own sin? Do you have no sin in your life? This is why I want to be really slow to cast the first stone. Because, yeah, you might be correctly and righteously calling out their unrighteousness. You're absolutely right. But let's take a look at your life. Let's see some of the things that you've been doing. You see, God might use an unrighteous person to rectify some things in your life. And he might use you to do that in somebody else's life. So I'd encourage you to be slow to cast the first stone. Because, yeah, there is a speck in my brother's eye. No question about it. Absolutely. 100%. I can see the speck. It's right there. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can see every one of you guys. You got a speck in your eye. It's true. But guess what? I've got a big plank in my eye. So God is going to use the Benjamites to chastise the other 11 tribes. Now, besides Benjamin, the men of Israel numbered 400,000 men who drew the sword. So 400,000 against 26,000. Seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Oh, this is easy. This reminds us of what? This is like the city of Ai. When they had entered the land, and they're like, you know what? We don't need to send up the whole camp. Ai is a small little place. We can take them. And guess what? They got routed. But why did they get routed? Because there was sin in the camp. And so God used Ai to call out Israel's hypocrisy, to call out their sin, and they were judged that day. And that's the same thing that's going to happen here. Then the children of Israel rose and went up to the house of God to inquire of God. Now, they're finally inquiring of God to see what they should do. And they didn't say, should we? They said, which of us shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin? They didn't inquire of God, should we go up against Benjamin? What do you say, Lord? What's the battle plan here? They're like, we already have a battle plan. We just don't know which tribe should go first. Who gets the first glory? So God answered, right? He didn't say, wait, what are you guys doing? I didn't tell you to do this. He answered their question. It's like, okay, if that's the question, then here's the answer. Sometimes we have not because we ask not. Sometimes we ask a question of our own wisdom. Hey, Lord, here's what I'm planning on doing. I already got this incredible plan. Look at this. It's amazing. I got all these different things. I got diagrams. I made an Excel spreadsheet. It's perfect. So should I do this or this? I said, well, okay, do that. He never said to do the whole thing in the first place. We want to make sure we go to God in the first place. So God said, Judah first. So the children of Israel rose in the morning and camped against Gibeah. They're like, well, we got our plan. God said Judah goes first. Got this in the bag. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin. And the men of Israel put themselves in battle array to fight against the men in Gibeah. Then the children of Benjamin came out of Gibeah, and on that day cut down to the ground 27,000 men of the Israelites. Wait, we had 400,000 against 26,000. And Benjamin seems to be doing just fine. But Israel lost 27,000. Ouch. This is just like at Ai. Because there was sin in their own camp, and so God used one party to judge the other. This is why we want to be slow to judge. Again, you see the speck in your brother's eye. Oh, you've got a great eye. You can really see it. Oh, I totally see it. I know it. Other people may not see it, but I can see it. And I'm an expert at this, at finding other people's unrighteousness. This is why I'm always cautious, very cautious, about people that are into discernment ministries. Because they're out there scouting, all right, who's doing wrong? Who is a heretic? Who's teaching false doctrine? You know what? They sometimes find people, though I'm on some of their lists. I don't know. Take it or leave it. And they can find some things that are wrong. But the question is, but do you have all your stuff right? So be very careful against pointing out other people's sin. Then the children of Benjamin came out against Gibeah, and they cut down 22,000 men of the Israelites. And the people, that is the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and again formed the battle line at the place where they had put themselves in array on the first day. Then the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until evening and asked the counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I again draw near for battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? And the Lord said, go up against him. So the children of Israel approached the children of Benjamin on the second day. Now, all right, so I'm going to come back to that. And and Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah on the second day and cut down to the ground 18,000 more of the children of Israel. All these drew the sword. Then the children of Israel, that is, all the people, went up and came to the house of God and wept. They sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So the children of Israel inquired of the Lord. The ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days. Right? So there's Phinehas right there. So again, this tells us this isn't happening at the end of the time of Judges. Saying, shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. Now, they had the basic idea. They had it correct. If you hear someone in one of your cities, which the Lord your God gives you to dwell in, saying, corrupt men have gone out from among you and entice the inhabitants of their cities, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, then you shall inquire, search out, and ask diligently. And if indeed it is true and certain that such an abomination was committed among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it, all that is in it and its livestock with the edge of the sword. And you shall gather all its plunder into the middle of the street and completely burn with fire the city and all its plunder for the Lord your God. It shall be a heap forever. It shall not be built again. So none of the accursed things shall remain in your hand, that the Lord may turn from the fierceness of his anger and show you mercy, have compassion on you, and multiply you, just as he swore to your fathers, because you have listened to the voice of the Lord your God, to keep all his commandments which I command you today, to do what is right in the eyes of the Lord your God. And what have we seen in this book? Every man was doing what was right in his own eyes. So Israel at large kind of got this correct. But notice here, corrupt men have gone out from among you, that's true, and enticed the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods. Wait a second. The book of Judges, what did we keep seeing? Other gods. Other gods, right? When Gideon was commissioned, what did he first have to do? He's commissioned to go and to fight, but he had Baal in his dad's house. Like that was like the headquarters. And so he had to go and cut that down. He had to deal with his own sin in his own house before he could go and deal with this sin out there. That's the thing. That's the same thing as you've got a plank in your eye. It's not that we close our eyes and stick our heads in the ground and we pretend that there's no evil out there. There's no unrighteousness. There's plenty. You don't have to be a genius to see it. But God says, yeah, that's true. It's out there. And I'd love to use you. But first, we've got to deal with your house. We've got to deal with your house. Because if you come against the Benjamites and think that you're going to teach them a lesson, well, you might eventually. But first, I have to humble you. First, I have to correct the things that are in your life that are messed up. And as we've seen throughout the book of Judges, it's all over. North, south, east, west, they're all a mess. It doesn't matter. Every tribe was really messed up. There were no exceptions. That they were all going away. They had these periods where they were following the Lord and it was good. But then, of course, they got back into following what? Other gods. And so that is the exhortation. You first have to take care of what's in your own heart. Okay, and the Lord said, go, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hands. So now they're really coming before the Lord like, oh, maybe we should seek the Lord in this. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But when you're serving other gods, you don't think that you need to seek the counsel of the Lord. But now they're going to do it just like they did at Ai. Then Israel set men in ambush all around Gibeah, and the children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day and put themselves in battle array against Gibeah as at the other times. So the children of Israel went out against the people and were drawn away from the city. They began to strike down and kill some of the people as at the other times in the highways, one of which goes up to Beit El and the other to Gibeah. And in the field, about 30 men of Israel. And the children of Benjamin said, they are defeated before us as at first. But the children of Israel said, let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways. So all the men of Israel rose from their place and put themselves in battle array at Baal Tamar. Baal Tamar, right? There's Baal again. Then Israel's men in ambush burst forth from their position in the plain of Geba. So the same strategy that they used in Ai, it's the same thing, right? They tried to go attack it. They got routed. And then finally they're like, Lord, what do we do? He says, okay, here's the plan. Do this. Follow me, and my way is best. And 10,000 select men from all Israel came against Gibeah, and the battle was fierce, but the Benjamites did not know that disaster was upon them. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed that day 25,100 Benjamites. Remember we had 26,000? They had 26,000 men that drew the sword, right? So this is the essence of their army, of their grown men. So the children of Benjamin saw that they were defeated. The men of Israel had given ground to the Benjamites because they relied on the men in ambush, whom they had set against Gibeah. And the men in ambush quickly rushed upon Gibeah. The men in ambush spread out and struck the whole city with the edge of the sword. Again, instead of Benjamin just giving up the evil men in their midst, they decided to fight, and of course this led to a terrible civil war. Now the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that they would make a great cloud of smoke rise up into the city, whereupon the men of Israel would turn in battle. Now Benjamin had begun to strike and kill about 30 men of Israel, for they said, surely they are defeated before us as in the first battle. But when the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, the Benjamites looked behind, and there was the whole city going up in smoke to heaven. So again, they got that part right. God said to strike the city and to burn it. Like, okay, they're doing that. But because nobody was really listening, everybody's doing what was right in their own eyes. There was no king in Israel. So it turned into this big melee, this big mess. And when the men of Israel turned back, the men of Benjamin panicked, for they saw that disaster had come upon them. Therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness. But the battle overtook them, and whoever came out of the cities they destroyed in their midst. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, easily trampled them down as far as the front of Gibeah toward the east. Wow. So we got them. We're doing this. Uh-oh. But guess what? And 18,000 men of Benjamin fell. All these were men of valor. Then they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and they cut down 5,000 of them on the highways. Then they pursued them relentlessly up to Gidom and killed 2,000 of them. Right. So this is a recap. We know that 25,100 died, but here's how they fell: 18,000 plus 5,000 plus 2,000. So all who fell of Benjamin that day were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and they stayed at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin and struck them down with the edge of the sword from every city, men and beasts, all who were found. They also set to all the cities they came to. Set fire to all the cities they came to. Wow. How did this start again? Oh yeah, like a lot of wars. Over something stupid. Over pride. Over selfishness. In fact, that's what James tells us. Where do wars come from? They come from your own lusts. A lust is selfishness, that I want something that I don't have and I probably shouldn't have. Or I want something that you have. and I'm going to take it. That's how these wars start. All this because this concubine had fled from her husband who wasn't treating her well, and we can see how he treated her in the end. And because that man didn't have courage to say, no, you cannot have her, I will fight for her. Instead of standing there and putting this thing to rest, no, he threw her out, they abused her, then he chops her up, sends her out to the four corners of Israel. And now an entire tribe has been taken away. Wow. So then it goes from bad to even dumber. Then the men of Israel who had sworn an oath in Mizpah, saying, none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife. Then the people came to the house of God and remained there before God till evening. They lifted up their voices and wept bitterly and said, O Lord, God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel, that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel? Well, I think we know why. We've put the pieces together, and we've seen a little bit here and a little bit there. Everybody's partly to blame for this. Everyone is partly to blame. The Levite has his part, absolutely. The only good guy that I can see was the father-in-law to the Levite. He was hospitable at least. Come on, hang out, and we'll have some more fun. Take off tomorrow. He did the right thing. He was hospitable. But nobody in Gibeah was willing to be hospitable. And then add insult to injury. Now they come and say, we want to know these men, or that man carnally. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Why is this coming to pass? So it was on the next day that the people rose early and built an altar there and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. God is not interested in our sacrifices. What does he really want? Does he want the flesh of bulls and calves and goats? Or does he want a contrite heart? God hasn't changed, not at all. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's unimpressed. Oh, wow, thanks for making me a burnt offering. No, I'd rather you do righteously, that you would act rightfully, that you would do the right thing. And all of this could have been avoided so easily, guys. But because everyone was doing what was right in his own eyes, instead of what God said to do, this has come to pass. Then the children of Israel said, who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up with the assembly to the Lord? For they had made a great oath concerning anyone who had not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, he shall surely be put to death. And the children of Israel grieved for Benjamin their brother, and said, one tribe is cut off from Israel today. What shall we do for the wives, for those who remain, seeing we have sworn to the Lord that we will not give them to our daughters as wives? Does this sound like Jephthah 2.0? Lord, thank you for giving me this great victory. And now to say thank you, I'm going to give as a burnt offering whatever comes out of my door. Well, who lives in your house, dude? Just a bunch of chickens? Or does your daughter also live there? Your only child. I didn't think about that. And he makes this foolish vow. And we don't know. It really seems that he probably offered her as a burnt offering. God did not condone that. Remember, this is a book of screw-ups. This is a book of messed up people who kept doing stupid things, and they just kept adding more to it. And so now we have this whole civil war that happened, and now Benjamin's practically gone, and then they made an oath on top of it. We can't give our daughters to Benjamin. We made an oath. So what do you do in these situations? Now they're getting all pious. Well, we've got to keep our oath. We can't break this. Oh no. But God gives a solution, as always. Ta-da, the solution. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to all the children of Israel and say to them, when a man consecrates a vow, by a vow certain persons to the Lord according to your valuation, if your valuation is of a male from 20 years old up to 60 years old, then your valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. If it is a female, then your valuation shall be 30 shekels. And it from 5 years old up to 20 years old, then your valuation for a male shall be 20 shekels, and for a female, 10 shekels. And if from a month old up to 5 years old, then your valuation for a male shall be 5 shekels of silver, and for a female, your valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if from 60 years old and above, it shall be, if it is a male, then your valuation shall be 15 shekels, and for a female, 10 shekels. But if he's too poor to pay your valuation, then he should present himself before the priest. Oh, the priest. Oh, yeah. At God's house, right? Who worked there? Levites are supposed to be working there. And who was the guy that didn't do well? The Levite. Because they were doing what was right in their own eyes. The priest shall set a value for him according to the ability of him who vowed. The priest shall value him. So they made this promise, this oath. We can't give any of our daughters. We made a vow and we can't change it. But God says, look, all you have to do is just redeem that. If you said, oh, we're consecrating to do this or to not do it in this case, all you have to do is just pay a fine and you're good to go. That's it. Pay the fine, problem solved. And all you're doing is you're paying that into the house of the Lord, which you'll get back anyway. So you're not out anything. But of course they don't know this, they're not thinking about it, they're not studying it. And how many times do we see this in Israel's history? Remember the days of Josiah, right? They're like, hey, we found this book in the temple. What do you think it is? Oh no, this is the law of the Lord. This is the Torah. And they wept and they rent their clothes because they're like, what have we done? We're reading in here what we're supposed to be doing and what's going to happen if we don't do it. And we just read it today. Blessed are you if you do these things, and cursed are you if you do these things. And they're just cause and effect. Sowing and reaping. That's it. If you do this, you're blessed. If you do this, you're cursed. And if they would just spend time in the Word. So, instead of resolving their silly oath with just paying a little bit of a fine, so now they concoct another great idea. Great, in quotes there. And they said, what one is there from the tribes of Israel who did not come up to Mizpah to the Lord? And in fact, no one had come up to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were counted, indeed, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent out 12,000 men of their most valiant men, and commanded them, saying, go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, including the women and the children. Wait a second. This is one of your own tribes. Okay, they didn't show up. Not cool, but you're going to go and slaughter everybody? I thought God said to do that to the Canaanites. He didn't say to do it to your own fellow people. Now, maybe you could say Benjamin kind of deserved it, sort of, kind of. At least Gibeah did, because there were wicked men who did wicked things here. But these guys just didn't show up for the battle. And they're going to slaughter every one of them? You can see why they're like, we need a king, because we're messed up. But really, they didn't need a king. What did they need? They needed hearts that were turned toward the Lord. That's what they needed. When we start putting our trust in a leader, any leader, I don't care, red, blue, green, whatever, the leader is not going to solve the problem. The leader is not the answer. Because the leader is a fellow human like you and me. And he or she may have their good points and their bad points. Their amazing ideas and their really lousy ideas. But the one that we need to turn to is God. Because, yeah, Israel got a king. They got King Saul. Well, yeah, he was kind of half-baked. Then they got King David. Oh, he was awesome. Yes, he was. But then he kind of blew it too. And then Solomon, well, he kind of went down a lot. And what did Solomon introduce into Israel? Oh, yeah, the worship of Molech, which they did what? They offered their little babies to Molech and they burned them. That wasn't good. And then the kingdom splits. And it goes downhill even more until finally in 722, the northern kingdom is taken away. And then about 170-some years later, the southern kingdom of Judah is taken away. The kings, the leaders, did not solve their problems. So having a new political leader doesn't solve our problems. Maybe in the short term, there's a short interim, this is good. We like this guy. But then, because the whole nation wasn't seeking after the Lord, then they all fell down again. Sad. And so, you shall utterly destroy every male, woman that has known a man intimately. So they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon, and announced peace to them. So Benjamin came back at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead. Wow, okay. So we'll slaughter our fellow people, we'll take these women, and now problem solved, at least partly. And yet, they had not found enough for them. And the people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a void in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for the wives for those men who remain, since the women of Benjamin have been destroyed? And they said, there must be an inheritance for survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be destroyed from Israel. However, we cannot give them our wives from our daughters, for the children of Israel have sworn an oath, saying, cursed be the one who gives a wife to Benjamin. And again, just pay the fine, and you can get out of this silly oath that you made. But no. Then they said, in fact, there is a yearly feast of the Lord in Shiloh, which is north of Beit El, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Beit El to Shechem, and south of Lebonah. Therefore they instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, go lie in wait in the vineyards, and watch, and just when the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, then come out from the vineyards, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh, then go to the land of Benjamin. Then it shall be, when their fathers or their brothers come to us to complain, then we will say to them, be kind to them for our sakes, because we did not take a wife for any of them in the war, for it is not as though you have given the women to them at this time, making yourselves guilty of your oath. Again, their priorities are so messed up, because there was no king in Israel, and every man was doing what was right in his own eyes. So the plan, let's go steal these women, let's kidnap them, which is a capital offense, by the way. Kidnapping is the same as murder. But it's okay, we're going to kidnap them against their will and put them into these forced relationships. God did not countenance any of this stuff. So if you ever get hit with this of a Bible skeptic, well, you know, in the book of Judges it says, you're like, yeah, it's a messed up book. The Bible has all the dirty laundry. Oh, you want to see what Israel's like? Here you go. Here's a couple good moments, then some bad, and then some really ugly moments. It's all right there. Yeah, there was no king in Israel at that time. And the children of Benjamin did so, and they took enough wives for their number from those who danced, whom they caught. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and they rebuilt the cities and dwelt in them. So the children of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family. They went out from there, every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And this concludes the book of Judges. It was a messed up time. If you don't believe me, just read the book. You think everybody was good? No. Would you want to live back then? I don't think so. Because it was kind of lawless. It was the Wild West. And instead of following what God had given them and told them, very good laws, that if a man will do them, he will live by them. But instead, they kept going from bad to worse, making dumb decisions. And the Levites, the spiritual leaders, weren't doing their job either. They're supposed to be educating people. They're supposed to have copies of the Torah and then going around and teaching people. We see that in the days of Hezekiah, because there was also a dearth of knowledge of the word. And so he sent out Levites to teach people what it actually says in the Torah. What a difference. If we'll just do what God says, we'll avoid so much pain. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this really messed up book that has given us a lot of negative examples, a few good ones. Help us to be smarter and wiser, but not to be haughty, not to point out everybody else's flaws, but the Lord, that we would take a deep look into our own eye and see if there's a plank there. We would look into our own house and see, do we have idols in our own house? And if we do, we would just repent of them, get rid of them, and say, Lord, now use me. Just like you did with Gideon. He had to take out the Baal from his own house so that you could use him. Lord, sometimes we expect you to use us with all the Baalim in our houses, but you can't do it. No more than you could use Israel when they went to fight against Ai. You had to deal with that sin first. So, Lord, thank you for these lessons of rooting out sin, that we would not let sin and iniquity and transgression, wickedness, live in our hearts, but that we'd get rid of it. We'd come to you in humility. We'd come to you in the love of our fellow man, of loving our neighbor as ourself. We'd be slow to anger and quick to forgive. And we would seek your face in all matters. Thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for this book. In Yeshua's great name, amen. If you would please stand. God has another blessing for you each and every week. I encourage you, maybe when you're going to bed or when you're waking up, maybe in those moments when you're scared, you're worried, you're fearful, you're not sure how you're going to get through the next day, you're not sure how you're going to pay the mortgage or tuition or whatever it may be. And you can do something. You can do this, it's okay. You can say, the Lord will bless me and keep me. Sometimes it's really good to personalize that. The Lord will bless me and keep me. The Lord will make his face shine upon me and will be gracious to me. The Lord will lift up his countenance upon me and will give me peace. Use this. This is a tool that God has given you to put in your toolbox so that when you have those moments and you think the sky is falling, God's like, it's not falling. I'm with you. I will be with you. But this is also something that we can bless others with. You have the power, the authority, you've been deputized to go out and to bless others. Imagine if we blessed others instead of cursed others. What a difference. Yevarech Adonai ve'yishmerecha, Ya'eh Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. The Lord will bless you and keep you. The Lord will make his face shine upon you, and he will be gracious to you. The Lord will lift up his countenance upon you, and he will give you peace. B'Shem Yeshua Mashiachenu. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen. God bless you. Please stay for Oneg. We're going to have